And it has an impact on us here in developed countries like the United States. We don't think a lot about TB because most of the burden of TB globally is in other countries, particularly developing countries. But in fact, what's happening in developing countries has a big impact on our health right here in the United States. These are data from the CDC where I've plotted the incidence per year in the United States of tuberculosis among individuals born in the United States, shown in blue, versus individuals born elsewhere who have immigrated to the United States in red. So following an upsurge in TB cases in the 1980s, public health measures were instituted to prevent transmission, to identify individuals who were infected, and case contacts were contacted, and new infections were detected early and treated, and so on. So this was quite an effective means, these public health measures, of bringing down the incidence of tuberculosis among individuals born here in the United States. But as you can see, the numbers simultaneously among individuals who were born abroad haven't budged at all. And what we think is happening is that almost all of these cases are occurring as the result of reactivation of TB from infections that were acquired in childhood. So individuals living in endemic countries acquire the infection in childhood. They then immigrate with a latent infection to the United States and reactivate and develop tuberculosis. What these data, I think, clearly show is that failure to control tuberculosis anywhere in the world translates into a failure to control TB everywhere in the world, including in the United States. Now, one of the myths I'd like to dispel about TB is that it's an old people's disease and that it mainly preys on those whose immune systems have waned due to old age or to immunosuppressive therapy and so on. In fact, the reality is that around the world, tuberculosis is overwhelmingly a disease of young adults. And that's illustrated in the graphs shown here, where, as you can see, looking on this side, at the age distribution along the y-axis versus number of TB deaths along the x-axis, TB deaths are overwhelmingly concentrated among adults in the age group 15 to 59. It's very similar, in fact, to the demographic distribution of AIDS cases around the world, which again primarily afflicts young adults. This is in stark contrast to most other infectious diseases as shown here. So these are the data compiled for all infectious diseases except tuberculosis and AIDS. And as you can see, in contrast to tuberculosis, most infectious diseases prey overwhelmingly on the very young. Why does this matter? Well, it matters because TB and AIDS, since they remove precisely those individuals in whom society has already invested, and those individuals who are sort of the backbone of the socioeconomic structure in societies, have a disproportionate impact. Yes, they kill large numbers of people, but they also kill that segment of the population that populations can ill afford to lose. This is particularly true in developing countries where social security systems, for example, may not exist, and where young adults usually have dependents in both the young and the old age categories. In fact, it might surprise you to know that tuberculosis continues to be the third leading cause of death worldwide among young adults aged 15 to 59, HIV/AIDS being first and ischemic heart disease being second. TB is also the third leading cause of morbidity among the young adult age group, measured in terms of disability-adjusted life years rather than deaths. So this is a metric that was devised by Murray and Lopez at Harvard University in the mid-1990s, which attempts to capture the disease burden caused by a condition apart from simple mortality. So I think it's quite interesting in this context, for example, just as an aside, that unipolar depressive disorders, which do not show up in the mortality charts at all, have now become the second leading cause of disability-adjusted life years lost worldwide and are slated to become the leading cause within the next few decades. This matters a great deal, how we quantify the burden of disease, because of course the allocation of resources follows the perceived need. So when we focus on morbidity rather than mortality, we target rather different conditions.